Welcome to Compelling Topics, the only channel dedicated to the perspective of leading researchers from the Italian independent scene. Let's turn your minds on. What truly lies hidden at the heart of the Vatican? Is it possible that beneath the magnificence of St. Peter's Square there conceals an ancient message, a symbolism deeper than what official history has handed down to us? Today, together with Nicola Bizzi, we embark on a fascinating journey through architecture, power, and mystery. From the origins of the Vatican Hill to the grand transformation brought about by the Counter-Reformation, we will explore John Lorenzo Bernini's project and the hidden meaning of his elliptical square. A simple monumental embrace of the faithful or the symbolic representation of the solar system. An architectural gesture or the silent affirmation of an ancient solar tradition that survived through the centuries. Amid schisms, heresies, the Inquisition, and secret factions within the Church, we will attempt to understand whether the obelisk at the center of St. Peter's Square is merely an Egyptian monument or the focal point of a cosmic message carved in stone. Let us imagine walking down a long corridor, the echo of our footsteps resounding against the walls. This corridor leads us toward a window overlooking one of the largest and most important squares in the world, St. Peter's Square. We stand at the heart of Christianity. Before us rises a great and majestic Egyptian obelisk, brought from Heliopolis, standing at the center of one of the most famous and visited squares on the planet. But what secrets surround the most important places of Christianity? The Vatican is one of the most mysterious and fascinating places in Rome, perhaps in the entire world. A place that conceals many enigmas, one that has been the site of extremely ancient activity, magicians, soothsayers, priests. A sacred place which, not by chance, became the symbol of papal power, the very heart of the Church's authority, the center destined to represent Christianity itself. Let us first try to understand where the name of this hill, rising on the left bank of the Tiber, originates. A hill that was not originally included among the famous 7 hills of Rome, since it was incorporated within the city walls only at a later time. According to ancient Roman traditions, the hill derived its name from an archaic deity. We learn this from Marcus Terentius Varro, one of the most important historians of ancient Rome. He states that the name came from the god Vaticanus, also known as Vagitanus, a minor deity, like many in the Roman pantheon, each assigned to specific functions. The primary function of Vaticanus or Vagitanus was said to be assisting children at the moment of their first cry. From this would derive his very name, linked to the Latin term vagitus, a newborn's wail. However, the hill, as attested by other authors, including Aulus Gellius, had been the center of ancient Etruscan activity. Already in Etruscan times, Vatican Hill appears to have been a meeting place for a brotherhood of magicians and soothsayers. More precisely, haruspices, those who foretold the future through the ancient discipline of haruspicy, one of the most fascinating practices of Etruscan culture. There is therefore another interpretation of the name, deriving it from vaticinium, prophecy, the art of foretelling. Sextus Pompeius Festus likewise confirms that the site was frequented by a confraternity of diviners. Pliny the Elder, in one of his works, recounts the existence on Vatican Hill of an enormous ancient holm oak, which he describes as the oldest tree in Rome. This tree is said to have been at the center of an oracular tradition. Pliny thus confirms that on Vatican Hill not only did brotherhoods of diviners and haruspices operate, but genuine oracular practices took place. The gods were consulted for responses about the future, guiding official decisions of the community. During the Imperial Roman period, a circus, an arena for chariot races and public spectacles, was built on the same site, the so-called Circus of Nero, later known as the Vatican Circus. According to Christian tradition, it was here that the martyrdom of the Apostle Peter took place. And, according to that same tradition, Peter inherited Christ's functions on earth. From this episode arose the tradition of the Vicars of Christ, the representatives of Christ on earth, the successors of Peter, who is regarded as the first bishop of Rome. Yes, Bishop of Rome, because the first popes were essentially bishops of the city. The term pope was not yet in use. The name would derive from a Mithraic tradition, a tradition that partially merged with Christianity. In the cult of Mithras, the pope was the highest priestly rank within a mystery religion that enjoyed great success in the Roman Empire and shared several features with what would later become Christianity. The Christianity that established itself in Rome was very different from its earliest form. It became, in part, a religion constructed for political purposes, finding in the urbs, the capital of the world, its center of power. In subsequent eras, Pauline Christianity spread throughout the empire, building upon doctrinal foundations that appear to have been pre-structured by figures such as Paul of Tarsus and Josephus Flavius. The latter, a Jewish high priest who entered into the favor of Vespasian, was even adopted by the emperor, taking his family name and receiving property in Italy. Josephus is said to have introduced into Rome a priestly entourage from Jerusalem, which settled in the capital with imperial approval. This group would have contributed to shaping a new doctrine, far removed from traditional Jewish messianic expectations, molded to political necessities and destined to gain the full support of Emperor Constantine. Constantine was never fully Christian in the strict sense. According to tradition, he converted and was baptized only on his deathbed, yet until the very end he retained the title of Pontifex Maximus. The Pontifex Maximus was the guarantor of the Pax Deorum, the juridical relationship between Rome and the gods, an equilibrium ensuring divine favor and the stability of the city. Under Constantine, Christianity began to assert itself more and more, eventually becoming imposed. Earlier persecutions of Christians had not been based on religion itself, but rather on the behavior of certain communities that challenged imperial law and disrupted the balance of religious tolerance that had always characterized Rome, a system founded on freedom of worship. Soon, however, the situation reversed. Christians, once persecuted, became persecutors. Under Theodosius, the Edict of Thessalonica outlawed all other cults, making Christianity the official and mandatory religion of the empire. It was an unprecedented legal imposition at a time when only a small percentage of imperial citizens were Christian. From that moment onward, although power remained nominally in the hands of the emperor, it effectively passed into the hands of the bishops. The center of this power became Rome, specifically the Vatican area, where, already in the Constantinian era, the first great basilica of St. Peter had been erected in imperial style above the presumed tomb of the apostle. That basilica quickly became the heart of Christianity. Subsequently, during the early Middle Ages, the city walls were expanded to include Vatican Hill. Until the 9th century AD, that hill had always remained outside the city's defensive perimeter. It was Pope Leo IV, between 848 and 852, who extended the walls and incorporated the Vatican within the city. From that moment onward, an omnipresent and pervasive power further strengthened itself, a power that effectively controlled a city in profound decline, as well as an entire Latin West that was itself deteriorating. Doctrinal disputes had already begun between the Western Empire and the Eastern Empire. The Eastern Roman Empire survived and would remain in existence until the fall of Constantinople. Yet from a religious standpoint, it would follow a different, parallel path. A schism took place between the Church of the East and the Church of the West, a schism that, despite various attempts, would never be healed. Unlike Constantinople, Rome had entered a vortex of absolute decay. The entire Latin West had fallen prey to the Romano-barbarian kingdoms that, following the fall of the Western Roman Empire in 476, with the deposition of the last emperor, Romulus Augustus, known as Augustulus, a child of only 11 years, succeeded one another in ruling the territories. Rome, Italy, and much of Western Europe were divided and governed by these kingdoms, until the Lombards rose to dominance. These were lands marked by plagues, impoverishment, and the loss of infrastructure. All of this unfolded under the direct domain and control of the Holy Roman Church, which had by then become a political reality as well, thanks to what has gone down in history as the false donation of Constantine. False, because it was the great humanist Lorenzo Valla, in the second half of the 15th century, who exposed the forgery. The donation of Constantine was a document drafted in the 9th century to justify the temporal power of the popes. It provided for the transfer not only of Vatican territory, but also of vast regions of central Italy from Emperor Constantine to the Church. A forgery, indeed. Yet upon that forgery the Church built its temporal power, a power that always had its center, its control room, in the Vatican. A power influenced not only by disputes among bishops and struggles against heresies, but also by the influence of a series of families known to history as the Roman black nobility. Families partly descended from the ancient imperial aristocracy, yet strongly marked by a Pharisaic influence, linked to figures introduced into Rome by Josephus Flavius, Joseph ben Mattathieu, the Jewish priest and general adopted by Vespasian. Many of these Roman black noble families are said to have originated from priestly lineages that came from Jerusalem and settled in the Urbs. These families would compete for political power in the Eternal City, especially from the early Middle Ages onward. Essentially, they were the ones who influenced the election of the pontiffs. The Bishop of Rome assumed not only the title of Pope, derived from the Mithraic Papa, but also that of Pontifex Maximus, thus embodying the ancient political and priestly role of Rome. Even today, popes are called pontiffs, bridge builders, a symbolic bridge that in ancient Rome represented not merely the crossing between two riverbanks, but the relationship between humanity and the divine, the guarantor of the Pax Deorum. Christian doctrine, as mentioned, was largely constructed. In order to establish itself within the Roman Empire, it required a long syncretic process that led to the fusion of symbols and doctrines from older cults, not only from traditional Roman religion, but above all from mystery cults of Egyptian and Hellenic origin. The solar cult and the Mithraic cult merged and overlapped with many Christian symbols. Within Christianity, different currents thus emerged, alongside numerous interpretations deemed heretical and later persecuted by the Inquisition. There were currents of Pharisaic origin coming from Jerusalem, but also factions connected to an ancient solar cult, already introduced into Rome by emperors of non-Italian origin. One example was Heliopolis, of Syrian origin, who imported and imposed within the empire the cult of an Eastern solar deity destined to embody the figure of Sol Invictus, the unconquered sun, celebrated at the summer solstice. In the final centuries of imperial Rome, before the affirmation of Christianity, the solar cult held a dominant presence. Later, the Mithraic tradition of Iranian origin overlapped with it, spreading already in the Flavian era with the construction of Mithraea, underground initiation sites where the rites of the mystery cult of Mithras were celebrated. Mithras became, in every respect, a solar deity. According to tradition, he was born on December 25th. December 25th, in fact, is a date that recurs in the birth narratives of several deities. Even Krishna, when aligned with our calendar, is said to have been born on that day, of a virgin. A particular perspective was analyzed by the scholar and researcher Sabard, who in the 1960s published an important work, later censored and banned, titled Christmas 5,000 Years Ago. In this essay, he attempted to demonstrate how Christian symbolism inherited elements associated with December 25th, a date on which, according to various traditions, several soteriological, salvific deities were said to have been born. Attis, Adonis, and even Osiris were later associated with this date. The fact remains that this solar dimension of Christianity would have contributed, through syncretism, to placing the birth of Jesus Christ precisely on December 25th, in conjunction with the traditional feast of Sol Invictus. Many solar characteristics were attributed to the figure of Christ. Why dwell on these solar characteristics in relation to Christianity? For a deeper reason, rooted in a heliocentric vision of the cosmos, a vision that sharply diverged from the one officially professed by the Church of Rome. The Church found itself declaring war on heliocentric interpretations, which harked back to ancient Pythagorean knowledge, a wisdom that was not only religious, mystical, and initiatory, but also scientific, placing the sun at the center of the system and asserting that the Earth and other planets revolved around it. Instead, the Church upheld a Ptolemaic-derived vision, according to which the Earth, creation of the supreme divinity, stood at the center of the universe, a kind of cosmic Garden of Eden. A conception linked to anthropocentric theory, placing the human being, inhabitant and dominator of Earth, at the center of creation. This vision, though officially supported by the Church, clashed with older traditions, beginning with the Pythagorean one. It was the German astronomer born in Poland, Nicolaus Copernicus, known in Italy as Niccolò Copernico, who first challenged the Church's canonical theories, developing a heliocentric model connected to ancient Pythagorean wisdom. Copernicus, it has been suggested, was a Pythagorean initiate, belonging to a secret order from which he acquired scientific and initiatory knowledge. He was nevertheless cautious. Aware of the risk of being accused of heresy, he arranged for his principal work, presenting the heliocentric theory, to be published only after his death. This is what happened, through the initiative of one of his pupils, and it generated great scandal and deep tensions within the Church. In the Vatican, the heliocentric theory was debated at length. Some factions considered it a threat to ecclesiastical power, others secretly cultivated and approved it. These were factions linked to an ancient solar current that looked favorably upon the development of a heliocentric conception. After Copernicus, Johannes Kepler, known in Italy as Keplero, refined the theory, demonstrating that planetary orbits around the Sun are not circular but elliptical. The shape of the ellipse assumes particular importance in the context we are about to explore. The Jesuits, too, secretly supported the heliocentric theory. It was studied extensively by Athanasius Kircher, one of the greatest scholars of the Renaissance. Kircher, a German who fled religious persecution, came from a Protestant family but converted to Catholicism and entered the Jesuit order, becoming a professor at the Roman College. He was a figure of vast culture. He attempted to decipher Egyptian hieroglyphs, investigated the mysteries of the cosmos and nature, and left behind an enormous body of work. But he was not the only Jesuit interested in heliocentrism. Other figures, including mentors and instructors of Gian Lorenzo Bernini, shared these studies. Bernini was one of the principal architects of the splendor of Renaissance Rome. Rome, unlike other Italian cities supported by great princely families and patrons, emerged from a long period of decline. After reaching approximately 2 million inhabitants during the Antonine era, the city had been reduced in the early Middle Ages to little more than a village of 20,000 people, mostly belonging to the lower classes who gravitated around papal power. It was a city built upon the ruins of great imperial Rome, dirt roads, open sewers, medieval alleys that had risen among collapsed structures turned into stone quarries. Districts that had once been magnificent had become countryside where sheep grazed. This was the Rome inherited by the Renaissance. Yet the foresight of certain great pontiffs led to a series of transformations that made the city a new artistic capital. Thanks to the support of enlightened popes, artists such as Raphael and Gian Lorenzo Bernini helped transform Rome into a jewel of the Renaissance. At that point, the need arose to make St. Peter's Basilica a renewed, pulsating heart of Christianity. It was a necessity dictated by multiple factors. The Protestant schism had occurred, a schism that had irreversibly divided Christianity. After the fracture that had already separated Eastern Christianity from Western Christianity, now Western Christianity itself was splitting apart. A large part of Northern Europe, Germany and Scandinavia foremost, had left the orbit and control of the Pope of Rome. There was therefore a need for a restyling, but above all for a symbolic and monumental reaffirmation of papal power. This transformation was entrusted to Gian Lorenzo Bernini. Born in Naples in 1598, in the midst of the Counter-Reformation, he soon moved to Rome, demonstrating extraordinary artistic and architectural talent from a young age. It was a time when the Renaissance was drawing its final breaths. The Counter-Reformation represented the Church's response to the spread of Platonism and the rise of a Renaissance culture that was not necessarily Christian, but looked back to antiquity, to ancient traditions, mystery cults, and Greco-Roman symbolism. This response involved curbing the Renaissance and reaffirming Christian orthodoxy, culminating in the resurgence of the Inquisition. Just 2 years after Bernini's birth, in 1600, Giordano Bruno was condemned and burned alive in Campo de' Fiori. Bernini thus operated in a papal Rome marked by the Counter-Reformation and a return to a certain doctrinal intolerance. The Council of Trent had established new fixed points to which Christianity was required to adhere. Bernini designed what would become the new square in front of St. Peter's Basilica, an endless construction site on which Michelangelo and many other great artists had already worked. The new St. Peter's Basilica, built upon the foundations of the Constantinian Basilica, imposing and grand, destined to become the largest church in the West, required a forecourt capable of transforming itself into the center of the world. Bernini's project greatly pleased the pontiff. In this regard, it is interesting to recall a study published in 1990 by Robert Bauval, born in Egypt, a scholar of alternative archaeology and esotericism, author of research on heliocentrism in relation to ancient Pythagorean knowledge and to the survival, within Western civilization, of confraternities linked to solar worship. According to Bauval, figures such as Giordano Bruno, Tommaso Campanella, and other lesser-known thinkers moved within the boundaries of Christianity, attempting to reaffirm an ancient solar vision, based not only on symbols, but also on heliocentric theory, which placed the sun at the center of the universe. It is significant that Bernini designed St. Peter's Square in an ellipsoidal shape, something never before seen in ancient Rome. In his drawings, he presented the idea of a great symbolic embrace, a male human figure, symbolic representation of divinity, spreading its arms to welcome the faithful. According to Bauval, the elliptical square echoed the schemes of heliocentric theory as developed by Copernicus and refined by Kepler, who had demonstrated the elliptical nature of planetary orbits. To symbolically complete this scheme, it was decided to place an obelisk at the center of the square. Ancient Rome was rich in obelisks. After the conquest of Egypt, Roman emperors competed in transporting them from Egypt to the Urbs. The obelisk chosen for St. Peter's Square came from Heliopolis, the city of the sun, one of the most important religious centers of ancient Egypt. It had long lain near the ancient Vatican circus. The decision was made to raise it and place it at the center of the new square. Its positioning was a highly ceremonial act, almost an act of high symbolic magic. According to this interpretation, it would represent the triumph, within the Vatican, of a faction linked to an ancient solar cult. A symbolism that does not appear in manuals of religious history and is not officially recognized, but which, in this reading, would have marked the triumph of an internal solar current within the Church, destined to maintain a certain influence over time. Naturally, this faction found itself at war with other currents, in conflict with heresies, and even with internal church groups that opposed it. The Jesuits would effectively have sided with this current. According to this interpretation, they would derive from an ancient doctrine of Dionysian origin later adopted by Ignatius of Loyola, who, before founding the Society of Jesus, is said to have been connected to the Alumbrados, an obscure mystical society that arose in Spain at the time. Gian Lorenzo Bernini therefore designed an ellipsoidal square that would place the obelisk at its center, symbolically embodying the sun, a square that, in Robert Bauval's interpretation, would represent the solar system itself and heliocentric theory. All this, apparently, under the Pope's nose. But is it truly plausible that the pontiff was unaware of the symbolic meanings of a project that seemed to challenge the astronomical theories officially supported by the Church? According to this view, the Pope was fully aware of it and would have given his tacit approval. He was certainly no fool. For the reconstruction of the obelisk, Camillo Agrippa, one of the great humanists and initiates of the time, also contributed to the design studies. He was not personally the one to set it upright, but the operation was based on his work. Thus, the obelisk from Heliopolis found its new place in a site sacred above all, a place considered holy since Etruscan times. which from that moment would embody the new face of Roman Catholic Apostolic Christianity of the Counter-Reformation. It was the heart of late Renaissance Rome, a city of new squares, streets, fountains, and majestic palaces moving toward the Baroque. Yet at its center stood a solar symbol, a heliocentric symbol, a direct reference to ancient Egyptian culture and Pythagorean wisdom, placed at the very core of Christianity. In our journey through time, we have explored the secret and mysterious aspects of the Vatican, from the origins of the Vatican Hill and its name, to the story of the remaking of St. Peter's Square by John Lorenzo Bernini. We have seen how this project would have been at the center of a secret dispute, a doctrinal struggle between different souls of the Church. A struggle that, according to this interpretation, saw the triumph of a faction linked to an ancient solar tradition. As always, the goal of Compelling Topics is not to impose answers, but to raise questions, to stimulate reflection, to look beyond the surface. If you enjoyed this episode of Saturday Classics, leave a like, share it, and let me know in the comments what you think. We'll meet again for the next installment of the great classics of mystery.